Hello, welcome to the latest of my deep dive videos. Today I'm going to explore the Taurus full moon, which occurs for the most part on the 5th of November, but in Australia on the 6th. I'll share with you shortly on the screen the exact timings, but this also is a super full moon, when the moon is that much closer to us. It's our nearest neighbour, and the magnification of that physical presence, also known as a beaver moon, just makes it that much more impactful. Now, full moons are when we can see the moon in the sky. For the most part, new moons are known as black moons. Sometimes we can see them a little bit. So this full moon is going to be particularly vivid, and therefore that creates a sense of drama. Also, it's in the sign of Taurus. Now, the intriguing thing about the full moon in Taurus is the moon loves being in Taurus. After its home sign of Cancer, this is its second favourite location. The moon here is exalted. The sign of Taurus has a great appreciation of stability, foundations. It can be about our appreciation of comforts and any sensual pleasures, of course, but also our approach to everyday resources. That can be money, it can be also our possessions. Now, this one occurs at 13 degrees and 22. Now, each of the 30 degrees, or 29 degrees and 59 minutes and 59 seconds of each zodiac sign is divided, of course, into 3 segments. And those individual 10-degree segments means that this one falls in the second decan, and that is sub-ruled by the moon. So we have a mutual receptivity to the moon, we have the moon exalted. So on that basis, on the face of it, this is a full moon that can create that drama, can create that physical presence, but it could also give us an opportunity to really tune in to the part of our senses that the moon in Taurus wants us to be mindful about. But full moons are when the sun is in opposition, so they're actually battling for dominance. They're known as the luminaries. The moon lights up the night, the sun lights up the day. The sun in the sign of Scorpio is very much about shared resources, where we're most invested, where we're most devoted. It can be a very intense energy, Scorpio, and it's possible just generally over the next 2 weeks that we are going to be asked to balance the ins and outgoings around our resources. So if there are some insurance renewals to come through, or perhaps there's some debt we're grappling with, or maybe we're structuring a business plan, working in a collaborative way with someone else around the partnership, we need to make sure that everything is in trim, is aligned. But as ever with any big planetary event, yes, we can talk about the overall feel of a full moon in Taurus, but we need to drill down into the detail of this individual one, which is completely unique to each year. I'm going to unpack all of this for you. I'm astrologer Patrick Arundell. A very warm welcome. If you've yet to subscribe to the channel, we have found that over 50% of people have not, who regularly watch my videos. If that's you, please do so now, but also please like or comment. This is very much a community, and I do try to answer every single comment. If you would like to work with me directly, please see my testimonials below. I'm just sharing a few on the screen now. And also, if you'd like to take advantage and watch my year 2026 video forecast, the overall one, but also for the individual zodiac signs, they are live. Please see the link below for those too. You can also catch your November monthly forecast too by seeing the link below. If you would like to find out what year 2026 holds for you from an individual viewpoint based on your unique birth data, please check out my special offer, which you can see on the screen, but also get more details below. So, as this event occurs at 13 degrees and 22 minutes, as I mentioned, on the 5th, apart from Sydney. I'm showing those exact timings and locations now on the screen. Now this is a full moon which also meshes with Almach, which is a fixed star, and it's a powerful fixed star. The interesting thing I found was that President Macron's moon is in a conjunction with Almach. I think he is someone who is certainly a person who has had an impact, whether you warm to him or not. But the interesting thing about this is this person, or the nature of this particular fixed star, is perseverance. And that's one of the great things about Taurus energy. It is a fixed sign, but so is Scorpio. So one of the things that's important with fixed energy is not to be too rigid, because if we're rigid, that can create tension. So important to be able to flex when we're talking to people, when we're discussing these Taurian themes. And Taurus is also the sign which is very much to do with land. It can be to do with food, can be to do with cooking, can be to do with making and crafting, can also be to do with the more intimate side of our relationships as well. So important to flex if the full moon does push into the open some tensions, and to be honest, I think this one could, but I will explain more shortly why. Once I've explained the exact aspects or individual influences on this unique event by sharing the event chart from a solar but also natal perspective, I'll then go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces, and you can get a flavour of what the next 2 weeks will hold for you. If you have got degrees in your natal chart from around about 11 through to 15, Taurus, Scorpio, Aquarius or Leo, that's very angular, so you're going to feel those energies most of all. You don't have to be a sun sign or ascendant of each of those 4 fixed zodiac signs, just that you have planets from 11 through to 15. And obviously if you have a planet or a point at 13 degrees 22, the amplification of this event is going to be all the more vivid. The people who do have the moon, like President Macron, that is conjunct this particular fixed star of Almach, can be quite famous. So that's intriguing. But let's think about this unique year's Taurus full moon. So I'm showing on the screen now the solar event chart. So this takes into account the overall zodiac beginning at 0 degrees Aries, and there's the moon at 1322 in the second solar house, which has an echo of Taurus. It's not exactly the same, but it has an echo. And there's the sun in the 8th house, again an echo of Scorpio, not exactly the same, at 1322. But we do need to be mindful of the ruler of the sign of Taurus, Venus. Now Venus is just still in the diplomatic sign of Libra, which she rules, the second zodiac sign after Taurus. But look at the energy that's created in the quincunx with Neptune, and a little broader with Saturn. And I think that's really intriguing. So when it comes to a romantic relationship, if, however much we've lent into another person's situation, there still could be some stuff that's simmering away out of sight. Maybe some confusion with Neptune, maybe some distortion, maybe some dishonesty. And then with Saturn, maybe it's to do with past events are still having some kind of impact. But if we break out of that Venusian and Taurus vibe, let's look at another key influence. And it is the sextile to the North Node. So the North Node in Pisces is really asking us to tune into our instincts and have the courage to do that. Now that's a water energy. The moon in Taurus is an earth energy. So we can focus on that worldly realm, the material realm that Taurus can represent, but I think the North Node's telling us to make sure that we tune into how things feel as well. But there's one other standout aspect which could be quite challenging over the next 2 weeks, and it's between Mars and Uranus, because they're directly in an opposition. In the case of Pluto, Pluto's actually linking to them. And of course, Mars and Pluto are the two rulers of the sign of Scorpio, so they're very much involved in this event. But in the case of Mars opposite Uranus, that can be a very igniting energy, because Mars in Sagittarius can be a truth seeker, but it also demands freedom from any restraint. So Mars in Sagittarius carries that energy anyway. If we put Uranus in the mix, that's just amping up that desire to say it as it is. So I think that there could be some very frank discussions, maybe around a financial matter, maybe around a relationship, maybe around a sexual connection with someone. And there could also be a very fast moving situation which creates a lot of excitement. So if you are looking to apply for a job, if you're going out on a date with someone, I think things can go quite fast, and that can be very exciting, but of course very un-Tauran, because Taurus likes to slow things down and make sure that it feels stable, steady, secure. It's about those foundations. So something is going to make this more unpredictable than would normally be the case with a Taurus full moon. So I think that could be to do with the wider financial climate. So I think things can shift and change and unravel or speed forwards at quite a pace. Not just over the next 2 weeks, to be honest, but when we have the Scorpio new moon on the 20th, that also is going to be a very restless event. But I'll tell you more about that then. But I think we are heading generally into a period of great financial uncertainty. And because of Saturn and Neptune being in the 12th zodiac sign, the sign of culmination, Saturn is the planet of outcomes and consequences. It's at the end of its 29.5-year journey, which will complete on the 14th of February. Neptune completes its 165-year journey through the heavens on the 26th of January. So I feel that whatever happens between now until early next year is going to be the outcome of a lot of decisions that have been made over these last 30 years in particular. And therefore, it's a very powerful time without this full moon. This full moon just brings a little bit more focus into the mix. But what about the natal event chart? So based on Placidus, Greenwich and the prime meridian, that's not because I'm in the UK, but because of that prime meridian, I feel that we can all collectively relate to this particular chart. We can see the ascendant is 7 degrees and 46 in Aquarius. But the position, ironically, in this proportional chart, which is Placidus, is the moon is in house 2. And the sun stays in house 8. But look at the position of Venus. That's actually in house 8, not 7. So I feel the 8th house can be about those shared resources, things like pensions, savings, investments, equities, but it can also be to do with how we're all connected in some way. And because Venus is so late in the sky in Libra, it is in a square with Pluto, and it is in a quincunx with Uranus. And Pluto in the 12th house suggests that there may be some subterranean things that are going to burst into the open. Now, because of the more sensual nature of both the moon and the sun across the signs of Taurus and Scorpio, and because of that Venus quincunx with Saturn and Neptune, because of Venus's square with Pluto, and Venus in the 8th house, very subterranean, I think we are going to see more come into the open around corruption, around where there's been the use of bribery, leverage, very Plutonian energies, very Scorpionic energies, but also anything to do with sex scandals. Now, I know there's been a lot coming out about the Epstein situation and the former Prince Andrew, now known as Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, and I feel that there is going to be more that's going to spill out into the open, because that opposition between Mars and Uranus is very, very powerful it's a freedom fighter, that aspect, and it won't be silent. So however much there has been a degree of control, damping down some of the strands of these scandals, I think that's going to be much more difficult. So we're entering a very volatile time for anyone who's been up to mischief and has been trying to keep it secret. Those secrets can tumble out into the open, and I just think generally around finance that things can be much more volatile too. Now, what about in terms of the more spiritual dimension of this energy? Well, I feel that the moon in Taurus asks us to make sure that we're anchored in what we feel our worth is. And it's not always about the price of things. You know, that old saying of people know the price of everything and the value of nothing is something we can all bear in mind over the next couple of weeks. So whatever we're considering in any situation where we might connect or invest or get closer or want to separate, we need to stay in touch with our value. What defines our values? What makes us really feel that we're worthwhile? And perhaps if we're always caught up in trying to achieve things from a financial viewpoint, there is an opposite view of that we can, nothing wrong with that at all, and of course that gives us a sense of security. But if that's too much steering our thinking, also important to take it inside and just remind ourselves about how wonderfully valuable we are. And if you are someone who's got a brilliant talent, because Venus can be very creative, the ruler of Taurus, this could be a chance for you to start taking it forwards and be more dynamic, telling people about it with Uranus and Mars in that opposition. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs to give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next 2 weeks. But that's special offer on your year 2026 forecast. You'll get your life roadmap report as well, which helps you to understand the patterns that have played out in your life so far. But also in my special package of 30% off, you'll get your 3 zodiac forecast for next year, along with your love, Indian and Chinese 2026 written forecast. Please see the link below for more. So Aries, you're not impulsive, are you? Of course you're not. But with Mars, your ruler, in a very rebellious part of your chart, and in an opposition with Uranus, the planet which really pushes us to be much more freedom-minded, you could find yourself very much in the mind to do something in an instant. And if you do splash out on something, perhaps to do with some technology, some travel, some presents for the run up to Christmas, the chances are if you just tune into your instincts, you can really enjoy it. But if your situation is a bit more delicate and you're needed to keep things in trim, a little bit more like the 2 of coins in tarot, you know, making sure that one coin is passed to the other hand, then for sure this is a full moon that it's good to try to get extra value. So being a bit thrifty and resisting perhaps that more impulsive side of your nature may be something you could consider. But because of the energy, the vibrant energy of Mars opposite Uranus, I think your capacity to generate some quite brilliant, innovative ideas, perhaps a new way of making money, generating new income, is really turned up to maximum. The only thing you've got to be conscious of is if you're working with another person. Because although Venus is in the diplomatic sign of Libra, the opposite sign from you, and has given you a chance over the last 4 weeks to use your charm, your personality power, and to connect in perhaps a very magnetic way, maybe even around your love life. And maybe this full moon is going to instigate some extra passion and intimacy between you and yours in a longer term situation because of Saturn and Neptune in an obtuse angle to Venus, but also Venus in an obtuse angle to Uranus and squaring off to Pluto. I think it's important to understand that any legacy issues could come up at this time, and that may include your past spending decisions, approach to expenditure. It may be to do with a business. It may be nothing to do with you. It may be to do with a partner who tended to be a little bit more free and easy with resources than you were. And you may be much more conscious of actually wanting to get things onto an even keel. And that's essentially what you can do over the next 2 weeks. If you decide to check out someone who can give you information or advice in a new or fresh way, I think that would be a very smart thing to do. And just generally over the last couple of years, with Saturn and Neptune in your 12th house, there may have been one part of your work or your previous activities which are not quite as active as they once were. They're winding down, but that's all presenting you with a new opportunity which will really take off in a big way from the 14th of February next year, when Saturn returns back to your sign. You may have had a little bit of a dabble, I'm not sure if that's quite the right adjective, but from the 25th of May to the 1st of September, there may have been something new that was formulating in your mind, but whether it really gained traction or not is another matter. But I certainly think it can do from the middle of February next year. But there may be certain parts of your situation that you do need to energetically release, because if you accept that some things do go through cycles, Saturn's very much about those cycles, and maybe there has been a period of letting go or just tying up loose ends. You're just preparing the ground for some new approaches, and I think you could have some brilliant ideas over the next couple of weeks. But as I say, temptation can also be very strong. Temptation is one of the things Taurus loves, a little bit of luxury, so it may be something that you just want to have a moment of indulgence or enjoyment, and if so, and you can afford it, why not? Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus Full Moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So your annual full moon in your sign Taurus is a chance to celebrate the best of your energy, but from a more emotional dimension. As I mentioned in the introduction, the moon is exalted in your sign, and this event at 13 degrees 22 occurs in the second decan of Taurus, which is subruled by the moon. So do listen to your inner voice, particularly with the North Node, which is an instinctive nudge in terms of our direction of travel, because that is in the part of your chart to do with your long-term plan, but also to do with your connections, and that can be friendships, your social interactions, as much as a close partnership. But because the Sun is in your opposite sign, over the last 13 or so days, relationships have been very much more on your mind. Now, if things are going well, the challenges that can come up with a Taurus full moon may not be quite so manifest. Perhaps for you, it's going to be more about your work situation. If you don't feel particularly valued, don't feel seen or heard, there's not much feedback or encouragement in the environment you're working in, I think those are things that you can be very mindful of, because Venus has been in a part of your chart which is to do with sacrifice, is to do with hard work. And if you've been really showing a lot of commitment and not really feeling that that's been noted, then that is going to be something you're much more conscious of over this next couple of weeks. Now, in a romantic context, I feel because Saturn and Neptune are in the part of your chart to do with your long-term plan, along with the North Node, but they're challenging Venus, your ruler. That's interesting. Also, Uranus and Mars in that opposition. They're in an electric opposition. There could be some quite big battles of will, maybe an issue that you've felt strongly about and the partner has not really been open to discussing it as much as you want, you may find a much more outspoken side of your nature comes up. So the diplomacy that can come from Venus moving into your opposite sign from Thursday the 6th of November can be very harmonizing, but I think between now and certainly a week's time, if there are some issues that have been rattling around in the depths, they do need to come into the open in any kind of relationship, whether it's with your boss, a colleague, a line manager, and you're not feeling completely happy, you need to speak out. You need to find your voice. And you can do so in a very authentic way on this year's particular Taurus full moon. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus full moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Gemini, your Zodiac sign is an air sign, therefore you have an appreciation of logic. You're a mutable sign, so you can be very flexible, and the more emotional and sensitive dimension, if you like, the shadow side of our nature, the sides of us that we're not always keen to peer at, maybe to do with our anxieties or worries or past events that didn't go so well. This is a full moon which is asking you to embrace those things. If you're reluctant to do so, and particularly at work, you may find that someone is very attuned to the exact way you do things, in fact all the way to almost micromanaging what you do, which could be a bit disconcerting. So watch out for that, because when you get a 12th, 6th house full moon axis like this one, what it can create is an emotional atmosphere where people are not actually going to be particularly open about the opposition or criticism they have for you, but they may end up sharing that critique amongst themselves. So office politics can come up with this particular full moon, but also any reluctance on your part to embrace those more emotional strands, because at the end of the day, the moon is about our inner world, it's about our sense of security, it's about stability, about our family relationships, it's about where we live. And you may find in some ways there's a part of you that does want to retreat a little bit over the next couple of weeks, but that's going to be difficult when Saturn and Neptune are high in the sky and are pushing you to seize a golden prize, and you could just find yourself feeling that much more vulnerable. So it's quite a complex full moon, this one. And then with Mars in your opposite sign, pushing you to assert your boundaries, engage in a more combative way, and in an opposition with Uranus in retrograde in your sign, there's another part of you that could be very outspoken, even if you're not feeling 100% as robust as you would normally would be. So a little bit of care is required with this full moon. When it comes to balancing the 12th and 6th houses, if we think about the, if you like, the trinity of physical, emotional and psychological, if you can get those in trim, that will be very positive for you. If you're a bit too much focused on making sure that your life is run in a very metronomic and organized way, but you're not quite so attuned to giving yourself some downtime, some rest and recuperation, just being more conscious of those more sensitive and more psychological strands is actually really important over the next 2 weeks. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus full moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Cancer, this particular full moon in Taurus certainly gives you a more than usual opportunity to tune into what you really want from your future. I think over the next 2 weeks you're going to encounter somewhat of a signpost situation where you reach a crossroads. There are different options. Sometimes choices in life are very empowering, but we have to make the decision, and you may feel a little bit conflicted. And part of the reason for this is that on this particular event, Jupiter, the planet of plenty and abundance, but also has a spiritual dimension through its rulership of Pisces, which shares your water triplicity in your sign, is in a T-square with Chiron in the part of your chart to do with your work, and Venus in the part of your situation to do with your heart, your home, your hearth. So as much as you may want to be super optimistic, I think that if you're feeling a little bit tethered or oppressed in what you're doing at the moment, because the sun over the last couple of weeks has really been encouraging you to enjoy things, to have pleasure, and if you're not showcasing your individual talents and skills and flair in a way which informs those future plans, which is flagged by the moon, no amount of optimism that comes from Jupiter is going to negate some of the anxieties you could have. And I think if something has been quite oppressive for some while with Uranus and Mars, particularly if it is to do with life routines, maybe to do with your work, if you don't feel that you are able to authentically be yourself, whether it's with your friends, whether it's with a partner, whether it's around your interests, whether it's within your work, that's where you are. You're at a bit of a crossroads. But that crossroads does offer opportunities. It's just you may feel you have to let go of something in order to gain something. And I feel that once Venus moves into Scorpio on Thursday the 6th, it is still going to be afflicted by Pluto and also by Uranus. So some of the issues are not going to be swept away, but what Venus will do is just reinforce that part of you that knows instinctively you need to be manifesting what works for you at a soul purpose level, because that's what your sign is all about. It's about being sensory. Of course, it's about stability and security. Protectiveness can be a little bit defensive, but I feel the key is the sun, soon to be joined by Venus, is pushing you to live a life which is much more enjoyable for you. And if your future direction at the moment isn't really speaking to that, that's the decision you need to make. So whether it's juggling your social calendar, whether it's the needs of kids, which is very fifth house, whether it is to do with being in tune with your highest hopes and your principles, very much the 11th house where the moon is, it all needs to in some way shake out. So over the next couple of weeks, and by the time we get to the Scorpio new moon, you're feeling much more content that you're truly in touch with what is the core of your being. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus Full Moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Leo, your feelings could be a little closer to the surface over the next couple of weeks. It's not just from this full moon, it's because Uranus is going to inverse back into the sign of Taurus on the 8th of November, right through to the 26th of April. So in terms of your work or your connection to the wider world, or relationship with older folks, maybe your parents, could be younger people from you, but Uranus moving back into your 10th house and this full moon, so that's coalescing together, suggests that you need to be mindful about how you're perceived, whereas the sun in Scorpio has seen you, or has been asking you over the last couple of weeks, to be much more concerned with how things feel. And because of the electric opposition between Mars and Uranus, they're bringing a spark to this process and can create a lot of excitement, also some change. And it could be around where you live. is an area that you do want to make some modifications. Now, it could be decorative, it could be decluttering, it could be moving the furniture around to create a different kind of space or energy. It may be that you do actually want to physically move, and that may be something that also comes up for you over these months through to the end of April. But the financial side of things, which of course is very Taurus Scorpio, will be part of the equation. And for you, in your overall solar overlay, Saturn and Neptune are in that 8th house of shared finance, and they are clashing with Venus in its home sign of Libra, which can be very much to do with the conversation. And however diplomatic you've been about discussing something, if someone has felt a little bit resistant to your point of view, I feel your emotions are going to be much more highly charged. Maintaining a dignity, a poise, it's not as often is the case as is stated with Leos that you feel you're above people, anything but you don't really like to show your vulnerabilities. But there may be something, if you feel really very triggered by it, that you do have to speak out over the next couple of weeks. And if it is about a deeply personal issue, do have the confidence to say exactly what's on your mind. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus Full Moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Virgo, this particular full moon occurs in your fellow earth sign of Taurus, the 9th house. The 9th house can be quite idealistic, can be our need for personal freedom and space, can be our appreciation of travel and being in different environments, because that can be very stimulating. But of course the signs of Taurus and Scorpio can be a bit resistant to change. Perhaps your appreciation of things being quite routine is part of this too. So I feel what's going to happen over the next couple of weeks is quite a lot of conversation, and those conversations may be with someone you're quite close to, because Mars has moved into to join up with your ruler Mercury, the part of your chart to do with your inner world, your home, emotional life. And it could, Mars here, give you a lot of gusto when it comes to modifying your home, perhaps in the run up to Christmas. But the opposition to Uranus is a very highly charged aspect. So if you are discussing something around your work or home, however diplomatic you might be, you may find that someone else is not quite as attuned to you as you would like. Now Venus has been going through the last 4 weeks a brilliant part of your chart for finances. The sign of Taurus can be about money, but if things do need to be balanced up a little bit, maybe your communications will point towards that. Just be aware, with Saturn and Neptune in your opposite sign in a clash with Venus on this event, if you are trying to negotiate something, read the small print. Because very often, if we get an offer on a car insurance renewal, or it's house insurance, or it's some maybe a credit card, it's very important to really dive down into that very precise stuff. And of course you have got a unique capacity to do that. So there is a sense of movement, despite the rigidity of Taurus and the Sun in Scorpio. But I feel that there can be some very intense conversations, particularly around money, but particularly in a close relationship. But if you are looking for new sources of income, or you're buying or selling anything online, do make sure that you're very precise and meticulous, as only you can be, through the whole process. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus Full Moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Libra, this event for you is the mirror image of what it is for everybody else collectively, in that the sun is in house 2, very Tauran, and the moon is in house 8, very Scorpionic. Now, most of us are mindful of balancing the ins and outgoings of our finances for much of the time. That can take on a higher vibration over the next 2 weeks. But also you have an opportunity to be very inventive. If you're approaching an idea, the energy of Mars and Uranus in an opposition can push you to step outside your comfort zone and do something more daring. But the 5th house is about speculation, and that's where you have Pluto. Now, Pluto is very transformational. It's in a brilliant link with Mars and also Uranus on this event, but a more challenging one with your ruler Venus, because that's just approaching the exit of your sign. So if there is something you're excited about, I wouldn't be too quick to dive into it. So just slow things down with Saturn and Neptune in the part of your chart to do with being of service, being very structured, being very ordered, and not in the best of alliances with Venus. Even if you have got an idea which you feel is very promising, I wouldn't rush it. Mars opposite Uranus could see you be a little bit impetuous, and perhaps a little bit uncharacteristically, because generally you do like to weigh things up very carefully. It's just that Jupiter, the planet of opportunity, is in a square with Venus, your ruler, but also with Chiron, the so-called wounded healer. And if by pushing yourself forwards in terms of your worldly hopes, by being very confident, that's good, but make sure you know your worth. So if you're pitching for something, a job, if you're applying to provide services for another business, if you have your own enterprise, make sure you know your value. That's vitally important. But I think things could move if you are discussing a potential contract or deal, or trying to rejig your finances in some way. I think things could move very, very rapidly over the next couple of weeks, and that in itself can be very exciting. Now, when it comes to romance, Venus, your ruler, has certainly been giving you some extra and added ways of expressing your unique self over the last 3.5-4 weeks. And you may have had more than one person who's been interested in you if you are single. So I think this is a full moon which asks you to stay in touch with your values. It may sound a bit old-fashioned because with the drama of Uranus, Mars and Pluto, there may be a larger than life character who's really calling out to you at the moment, but I think you need to consider what it would be like when things settle down a bit, would be a bit more mundane and everyday like. If you imagine the person that you would feel that you could be most in touch with your true self, that will be quite a guiding principle if there is someone that you're finding very exciting to be around at the present time. In an ongoing relationship, I think if you feel that you give a bit more than your partner does, it needs to be discussed. And I think you could be surprisingly direct with Mars in that opposition with Uranus. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus full moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Scorpio, when the sun moved into your sign 2 weeks ago, there was a clash with your modern ruler Pluto, and there may have been some tensions with someone you're quite close to, maybe a family member, maybe it was a contractor if you're having some improvements done to your home. But what that was also was a test of how single-minded you were going to be around a project, an idea or a plan, a strand that you really feel very passionate about. And this full moon is a bit of a test, to be honest, not in terms of your commitment, more to do with how other people are viewing what you're doing. If you've being as inclusive as possible in terms of explaining it and how it can benefit them, they may continue to cheer you on. But if someone feels that you've been so focused on that, a hobby, an interest, a friendship, and they feel really quite excluded, I think the potential for some intense discussions over the next couple of weeks is very much to the fore. But because you can be very, very willful, if you really feel very, very motivated by something, you don't really like to give in. And because your two rulers are collaborating in a constructive way on this event, that part of you that can be very single-minded is amplified just at a time when a little bit of flexing with the moon in your opposite sign, hearing where someone's comes from, just receiving that message, discussing it, being open to maybe a little bit of flexing, that's probably the smarter thing to do, to be honest, because otherwise, if there have been some resentments that have been building up on the back burner, particularly with Venus in your 12th house and her clash with Saturn and Neptune in the 5th house of your romantic chart, in a close tie where perhaps you are living together or seeing each other some while, something could really get much more turbulent by Thursday the 6th as Venus arrives in your sign. But as it does, it is going to clash with Uranus and also Pluto as well. And there could be a lot of energy that spills out into the open. So I think the shrewd thing to do on this full moon is not to stop being very focused on what you want to achieve, but just read the runes a little bit when it comes to the atmosphere, how people are feeling. Even if you don't agree, just try to engage with that a little bit, and I think that can bring a sense of equilibrium to the equation. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus full moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Sagittarius, each year when there is a Taurus full moon for you, it's a call to action to be more mindful about those everyday routines, about what you eat and drink, about making sure your physical well-being is as good as it can be. And the position of the sun is a much more atmospheric energy. It's much more to do with the intangibles that we can't see, such as our senses, our more psychological well-being, and that's the juggle. The two signs involved are fixed, so that means they can be quite resistant to change, but they can also be, of course, about finance. So if finance is a worry for you at the moment, that can feed into the more psychological side of yourself and affect your energy. So your energy could be a little tender over the next couple of weeks. But ironically, what energy you do have, you may want to apply it to something that excites you, does something different, moves the moment. So there's going to be a little bit of a juggle. And the reason for this, Sagittarius, is the arrival of Mars, the planet of passion and drive, into your sign, forging an amazing link to Pluto, the planet of change, which is going to give you a lot of willpower, but Uranus is opposite Mars. And that can create impatience. It also can create an ignition point. So if there have been things that you felt frustrated about, they could come out in a very much more obvious way. And in a sense, if you do release some stored up energy, I think that can be good for you. But around your social situation, Venus has been making its way over the last 4 weeks through a very positive area. But on this event, it is being challenged by Saturn and Neptune in the tender 4th house to do with being protective, maintaining your defenses, if you like. So even around your social situation, even if there's part of you that wants to move the moment, do something dashing and different, I'd slow things down a little bit. So self-care of any kind, whether it's early nights, exercise, looking at the the ingredients on the packaging of what you may be eating, trying to cook things from scratch, just getting things as virtuous as possible. That's the moon energy. The emotional energy that comes from the sun could be your fears, but it can also be your resistance to some change. And then there's another part of you that could feel quite highly strung, to be honest, with Mars opposite Uranus. So just be aware of working on lowering your adrenal footprint, if you like, getting to bed early, turning the phone off, putting it on the other side of the room, putting the blackout curtains on, listening to some really relaxing music or reading a good book, and just giving yourself a bit of a cocoon to life's outer pressures over this next 2 weeks. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus full moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Capricorn, the full moon for you occurs in the 5th house. The 5th house can be about life's pleasures, can be about kids if you have them, can also be about your social interaction. And you could find, and of course we're now in the run-up to the festive season, that there could be some invites that are going to be heading your way over the next couple of weeks. What's not to like? Well, maybe because Mars and Mercury are newly arrived in your 12th house, I think whoever you're drawn to, whether it's romantically, whether it is in terms of your social circle, Mars and Mercury are asking you to be much more conscious of the quality rather than the quantity. I know it's an old maxim, we all know it. Do we always keep to it? Because we can get really caught up in events. And I think that it's important to be conscious that your future hopes, which is where the sun is, are going to be boosted by the arrival of Venus on the 6th. So your social situation can revive over the next 2 weeks. But I feel that over the next week in particular, if there are people around you that don't really align with you in terms of perhaps their values, perhaps they're a bit draining energetically, maybe it's around a financial matter. Not everyone we like necessarily are people that we might agree with on every strand. So I think you need to be aware of keeping things in balance in terms of what you want from your future, your long-term plan, the sun in Scorpio, but make sure with the moon in Taurus, you're enjoying it. And that's really critically important, because with Uranus currently in your 6th house in an opposition with Mars, I think if there are a lot of things buzzing for your attention, maybe at work, maybe you're feeling a bit drained if someone invites you out and it just doesn't feel it's something you want to do, have the confidence to say no. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus full moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Aquarius, the position of the sun is high in the sky, really encouraging you to seize opportunities when it comes to your work, career and ambitions. Now, not everybody's ambitions are around those. It could be around hobbies, could be about local activities. It may be around spending time with your grandkids if you have them. But that 10th house position of the sun is about leadership, and it is about how people perceive you. And because Mars and Mercury are now in the friendliest part of your situation, some opportunities around your work could be coming your way, and quite soon and quite quickly, particularly once Venus moves to the top of your chart on Thursday the 6th. But as it does, it is going to clash with both your traditional ruler Saturn, as it does on this event, but also with Uranus, your modern ruler. So Venus at the moment is in the part of your chart that's making you very conscious of your perhaps higher principles around relationships, but the moon in Taurus is about how it all feels. And being an air sign, of course I'm in Aquarius as well, it's always important for us airy people to stay in touch with those feelings and not look at things in quite such a rational, detached way, which is very much the principle of air. So the emotional part of life, home, family considerations, even at work, if you're offered a new role, how does it feel? That's what the moon's asking. If you're spending a lot of time looking after other members of your family and you're playing a leadership role, is it a bit too much? Are you feeling that you're being taken for granted a little bit? Because Mars in an opposition with your modern ruler Uranus is making you much more aware of that principle that's important for Aquarius people, of a bit of space, a bit of freedom. It can't all be give and responsibilities and obligations. And with Venus in that 9th house, very, very principled around your romantic situation. And of course, the sign of Taurus can be about sensuality and intimacy, as Scorpio can be as well, where it's even more invested. Does it feel right? Venus is in a square with Saturn. Thanks so much for joining me for this Taurus full moon special. Please check out my year 2026 deep dive forecast by clicking on the link beneath this video, and also your special offer for your personal forecast for next year, your life roadmap 30% off, and your individual written forecast for general, love, Chinese and Indian forecast, which comes as a free gift. So Pisces, over the last couple of weeks, the sun has been coursing its way through your fellow water sign of Scorpio. For you, that's house 9. That points towards change, spontaneity, independence, travel, higher education, being in touch and enjoying more cultural interest that you may have. You often have a great appreciation of the arts. The moon on this event is in house 3. That's everyday communications. It's not so much the big picture. So the moon's reminding you that despite the sun pushing you to be more expansive, how does that play out? And how do you make it happen? So that can be through emails, text messages, conversation, and they're going to be quite vivid over the next couple of weeks. But I feel if you have been feeling restless, one of the areas that can play out in, particularly over this next 2 weeks, may be around your work. If you're not feeling it professionally, Mars having gone right to the top of your chart can push you to be more assertive, more self-confident and more risk-taking over the next 6 weeks. Also Jupiter, your traditional ruler, happens to be in a lovely link with Saturn and Neptune in your sign. So you've gone through quite a lot of rationalisation over the last couple of years. You've probably slimmed your life down to what you feel is really crucial, and that's a very positive thing. But Jupiter is in a square to the ruler of the sign of Taurus, Venus, which is in your 8th house, and that 8th house is very scorpionic. That can be about desire, it can be about possessions, it can be about intimacy. Is there someone calling out to you at the moment who's making your pulse race? Because you may be feeling a lot more daring and even in the mood to make the first move. But just be conscious that Jupiter in a square with Venus can kind of trick us into being a bit too self-confident and a bit too self-assured. So even if there is someone that's making your pulse race, are they truly the right person for you? And that's where the dialogue comes in. But if you do want to change what you do for a living, you do want to take the lead in your social situation, Mars is definitely giving you a much stronger energy, a much more assured way of being, and that in itself is exciting. But I think there's going to be a lot of chat, a lot of movement and a lot of ideas flowing around, because you are in the mood to shake things up a little bit in whichever way works for you personally.